Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him!
Crucifixion. Not a proper decision. No, and it's made by a few and supported by not a lot more. They captured Jesus in the middle of the night, dragged him from one pious leader to another, accused, massaged quotes, condemned, physically abused Jesus. Oh, and then just before this community's special day of solemnity, they present Jesus to Pilate, my husband. Present Jesus for the death sentence. Oh, because only the occupying overseer Rome can sentence death. Oh, I told Pilate I'd been extremely upset by this dream I had. Oh, I urged him not to get involved with this upright man. I told Pilate Jesus was not like a scion of Perea or Anthrogenes. He wasn't trying to lead an uprising against Rome as they were. Oh, and my husband Pilate, stuck right in the middle, did seem to listen. He told the crowd, I have gone into the matter myself, and I find no grounds for any of the charges you bring against this man. And they rebuked him with a chant demanding death. Oh, what am I to do with Jesus? Questioned Pilate. Let him be crucified. What harm has he done? Crucifixion, they riposte. If you set him free, you are no friend of Caesar's. Pilate tried another approach to bargain with the crowd. Oh, as one man, the crowd howls, crucify Jesus, give us Barabbas. So, Pilate washes his hands of the matter, acquiesces to their demand, and in essence, Jesus is condemned to death.
It's sometime after 8 a.m. this Friday morning. The crowd that demanded his crucifixion is growing now. Everybody wants to see. A few minutes after I got here, they brought Jesus from the building. He's so tall, and there's something on his head. Something pointed. Something embedded in his temple and hair. Like a crown of pointed thorns. Then 2 soldiers appeared. They were dragging a roughly cut square column of wood, the length of a man's height. The 2, plus 2 others, wrestled the wood up and placed it across his shoulders. Jesus accepts his cross, and with 2 soldiers on each side and a commander in leading, this tiny troop of 6 begins to march up the street, through the gates of the city, and then ultimately the place of the skull.
The crowd's getting louder. Jesus is approaching. Maybe my family had made a last-minute decision to lay me and my pallet on the curb close to the procession. I'm paralyzed, can only move my head. They had hoped if Jesus saw me, but the crowd had swelled into the street. Through their legs, I can see the procession. First, a uniformed Roman centurion passes. I'm only a yard from the street, but people stand between me and I saw 2 soldiers pass. And then the crowd gasped. Something had happened. Jesus fell to the ground. I could see his face through the forest of legs. If I could only attract his attention, but I can't move. Then he raised his bruised and bloody head. He turned and looked directly towards me, nodded ever so slightly. Then the soldiers dragged him to his feet. I raised both my arms to touch Jesus, and then I raised both my arms.
We were ahead of the crowd and closer to the street, almost halfway to the city gates. My name is John. I'm one of Jesus' disciples. I was there with Jesus' mother. Mary wanted to see. We were terrified when we heard the crowd go silent. Something had happened. Jesus collapsed? Jesus died? She would never. But moments later, the shouting, the human discord resumed, and once again was moving towards us. Maybe, she said, the crowd will stop the procession. Maybe she could even see, maybe even touch. The condemned crowd moved right past us. Mary thought she saw the top of his head. Then he was gone. But suddenly the procession stopped. The narrow streets, the swelling number of clutching spectators. But Jesus was so far ahead. I could see him. He raised his head. He breathed deeply. And then he seemed to make the decision to look back. Back through the crowd of unfamiliar faces. Back to look directly at us. At Mary. Not a word was spoken, but Jesus had met his mother, maybe for the last time, as loving humans. Mary cried. The sting of the leather straps on Jesus terminated the union. But this time, when Jesus resumed, he stumbled. He was obviously struggling with the crossbar. The centurion with the plaque of crime written decided,
Grab that Cyrenian! Make him carry that crossbar!
My name is Simon. I'm the Cyrenian chosen. And I am not unhappy about that decision. Something happened during that trudge. Once selected and forcibly dragged from the crowd, the soldiers lifted the wood crossbar from the street where it had slipped from Jesus' shoulders, and they placed it on mine. 80 or 90 pounds. I am not weak, but it was heavy and rough cut. So even through my layered apparel, I could feel slivers prickling my shoulders. I could not imagine what Jesus had felt through the thin garments he was wearing. But something. He never touched me, talked to me, but something happened to me. When Jesus looked back at me somehow, I felt that all was well. I didn't notice it at the time, but Jesus' blood had covered the cross, and it got on my hands and on my clothing. It seemed that the physical pain just diminished, and it was replaced that Friday by a kind of spiritual joy. I've never felt it before. There was something more to this man, and I was frankly ecstatic to be there with him.
I had been told by Jesus' followers that he had been scourged, he had been struck and beaten and turned over to the soldiers for their frenetic ridicule. But Jesus was a human being, and he couldn't see. Blood, sweat, dirt, tears, spit, yes, spit covered his face. It was my decision, mine. I pushed past those guards. I pushed past those soldiers. No one was going to stop me. And me, Veronica, I cleaned the face of Jesus. I held that fabric up to his bloody, dirty, sweaty face. My hand held there like iron to a magnet. And then Jesus' hands, which were bound at the wrist, moved up to cover mine. And he turned towards me, and the shawl slipped from his face. His eyes were clear. I could almost hear him thank me. And then some soldier behind Jesus shoved him, and I stood there as a contingent of soldiers and the condemned marched on down the street to Golgotha. I haven't heard his speakings, but Jesus remains.
It was the uneven stones in Jerusalem's streets that tripped Jesus a second time. I tried to help him, but the soldiers were first. They roughly grabbed Jesus under the arms and hauled him to his feet and then pushed him forward. The crowd by this time was some less antagonistic. In fact, some were actually moving toward a stumbling Jesus, offering help should he need it. But the soldiers kept the crowds at bay, yelling at them as much almost as at Jesus. It was a little after the third hour, 9 a.m. The sun was rising now, higher. It was getting hot, and the stench of perspiration was alive in Jerusalem's narrow street crowded with people. And then we were through the city gate and outside the walls. More space, even a slight breeze. But while the smell and the claustrophobia were gone, the aroma of rotting excess and an invasion of biting flies and stinging insects replaced them.
And us, a wailful crowd of women from Jerusalem, and we stopped the whole parade. The decision was, meet outside the city gates before the place of the skull. Show Rome, show Jesus that we had heard, that we cared. Rome, we quickly discovered, didn't care. Two of the soldiers from Jesus' entourage drew their short swords and waded through our female obstruction. We were women of all ages and nationalities, women with veils over their heads and faces, some kneeling, some sitting, and all writhing, and everyone crying loudly. The soldiers would raise and move 2 or 3, and 4 or 5 would fill their vacancies. The ladies cried and reached out, making futile attempts to touch Jesus if and when he would move through them. And while the soldiers were intent on opening a way to the cross, Jesus talked with the women of Jerusalem. While we lamented his passage and coming death, he was urging us to turn our wailings inward. At one point he said, "Weep not for me, but for yourselves and for your children." At another point, Jesus warned, "Daughters of Jerusalem, the days are surely coming when people will say, 'Blessed are those who are barren, the wombs that have never borne children, the breasts that have never suckled.'" I fear he was predicting our future.
I'm a doctor. I'm a historian. My name is Luke. I'm one of the 70 that Jesus sent to spread his word. And I was glad that the women had stopped the funerary march because it gave Jesus a chance to breathe, to pause, to prepare. But while the soldiers culled and they slept and they swept, and instead of pausing and resting, Jesus taught. He taught. And finally, soldiers from both sides raised him up on his feet. They stopped his teaching. They shoved him forward through the mob, the chaos of reaching arms and wailing shrieks and grabbing hands. But the loss of blood and no food and the dehydration, the physical pain, the mental anguish, Jesus collapsed a third time.
A lot of people who are dragged here by the authorities collapse. They look up the road and see the vertical columns of the crosses. They're called stipes. And they realize for the first time they really are going to die. Some, like us, survive here. It was decided by those in the city that we will live outside the walls so we can't contaminate the poor, the cripples, the insane, the ill, lepers like me. We survive here. When no one else would, Jesus would. Talk with us, eat with us, recognize us as human beings. So we welcome this Jesus, a walking dead man. Garbage decays nearby. And there's a sharp, caustic odor when the wind blows this way, like now. Lacerated bodies immobilized on the stipes are an open invitation to feeding larvae, stinging insects, and an unhindered invasion of other crawling bugs.
It's after the third hour, 9 a.m. The crowd, the revilers, the chastisers, the mourners, the seekers, the questioners, they're all encircling the vertical columns on the hill, the stipes. The crowd is neither respectful nor quiet. The soldiers relieve the man carrying the wooden crossbeam and stand the condemned before the stipe. The soldiers offer Jesus some wine. It has myrrh or gall in it. It's supposed to relieve the pain. And Jesus refuses. They rip the clothing from his body. The lictors, his soldier floggers, have done their professionally brutal job. There were slashes across his backside. I didn't count, but probably more than the law allowed. 39 slashes from his ankles to his neck. And with the abrupt removal of most of his garments, those lacerations were ripped open again. Ripping the clothing from a man not only reactivates the wounds, it strips the man of his civilized dignity. So, he now stood naked before the crowds. Some turned away, some cried. Jesus was a strong man. He was structurally sound. But this morning, his head was drooped, his body stooped, his arms, bound at the wrists, hung before him. Jesus was waiting for the next. Stipes and their cross members are not smooth. Simon discovered they are designed to irritate the body attached to them. The soldiers laid the cross member at the foot of the stipe. They grabbed Jesus, they threw him on the wood. They cut his bindings, they stretched his arms along the wood, and they began to nail Jesus to the cross. One nail for each, because the palms couldn't hold a body that would be slowly dying and slumping, so they nailed it into his wrists. Once nailed to the cross member, a soldier on either side, they raised the 80-pound wood with Jesus attached off the ground, almost as high as they could reach. And then they slipped the cross beam into its notch on the stipe. Jesus' feet were now about a foot off the ground. Through the cartilage between the ankle and the bones and the feet, with one nail, they attached Jesus' feet to the cross. On another medical note, I must add, to make this death even more humiliating, as if total exposure was not enough, as a person dies on the cross, they also lose control of all their bodily functions.
With the heavy work done, the soldiers sat down to decide who should get the garments Jesus wore. They divided it into 4 shares, one for each. But because his undergarment was seamless, woven in one piece from neck to hem, they, instead of tearing it, decided, let's throw dice to decide who is to have it. The sun was high and shone directly on that rise of crosses outside Jerusalem's gates. It was sometime now late in the morning that Friday. Jesus was between 2 other occupied crosses. The men tied to their crosses were both criminals. One cursed the air, the people who had gathered or walked by, even Jesus. The other chided his fellow and asked Jesus to remember him. And Jesus promised that thief that he would be with him in paradise. Many who had walked the parade lost interest now and moved away. The haunting became less as the temperature rose. Passers-by read the placard above Jesus' Pilate's inscription, Jesus the Nazarene, King of the Jews. Some of Jerusalem's leaders were critical of Pilate for his extreme summation of the condemnation hearing that morning. Pilate replied simply, "What I have written, I have written." With fewer people around, those who had followed Jesus, his apostles, members of his 70, women, Mary Magdalene and his mother, Mary, others all moved closer to the cross still. Even so, the soldiers keeping us all at bay.
I was probably closest to Jesus when he called. John, you're to care for my mother. I nodded that I would. Mary heard the interaction between us and came closer. Jesus looked at the 2 of us and said, "Woman, behold your son." And to me he reiterated, "John, behold your mother."
Past the 6th hour, high noon, the sun was highest in the heavens, but it was not shining on Jerusalem. The day had grown dark. The air was still. There was trembling in the earth. Jesus was mostly quiet. Once he absolved the soldiers, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And then another time, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
I thirst. Those were the only words I heard. I was alone on that hill. Didn't know anyone in the crowd that remained. But I was there, and I was with my teacher. And he was asking for what he needed. And I wonder if those words, "I thirst," aren't something that he was inviting us to do, to ask God for what we needed. The sky was dark. There was no sun. It was after 3 p.m., the 9th hour, when I saw him twist, and then he called out, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. It is finished." And Jesus' body slumped on the cross, and he hung there, supported just by the nails through his wrists and feet.
I remembered this Friday morning, my mentor, priest, and others, we had captured Jesus. And I was there too. I was the only one injured. And now, I was bringing this man who had healed the severance a message from the temple that would expedite his death. The soldiers were to break the legs of the crucified. Their bodies must be removed before the Sabbath because of the next day was a day of special solemnity. And I watched the soldiers perform their orders, but I did not see them break Jesus' legs. His naked body, now clothed from the day's dust and the filth of life, sagged on the nails that held it to the cross. And to assure what they deemed obvious, they drove a spear into his side and watched some water and blood flow out. And while the soldiers withdrew the nail that secured his feet to the cross, others of the cohort stretched up and lifted the cross beam with Jesus' body attached from its place on the vertical stipe and just dropped it to the ground. The women and the men who had remained with the crucifixion all day now ran forward and pushing through the soldiers to surround the body. With what water they carried, they cleaned as much of it as they could and straightened it and moved it away, leaving Mary alone with her son. And she knelt on the ground below the stipe and held her child. And she carefully dislodged the circlets of thorns from his head. And she gently swept aside the hair from his eyes with her shawl and her tears, and wiped away the blood and the spittle and dust and dirt from his face. And alone, for a time, rocking the lifeless body of her dead son. And she cried. Oh my God, how she cried.
I went to Pilate, asked for Jesus' body. I'm Joseph. I'm from Arimathea. My tomb was carved out in my garden close by. I brought a linen shroud. Since the tomb was nearby, we laid Jesus there.
I really want to thank you tonight for being here. I want to thank you for your support of Unity Minneapolis. And this was made possible because of J.B. Eckert. He's the writer and the director. He put tons of hours into this, and we're so appreciative of that. He's a wonderful friend of Unity Minneapolis and just happens to be the husband of Connie Eckert. So we just bless him and we give thanks for him. Also, David Lynn and our additional staff was very helpful in putting all of the technology together and editing what needed to be edited. Numerous hours was put in that as well, and so we're so appreciative of that. So tonight, my friend, we get to practice that as you give, you receive, and as you receive, you give. So dear friends, if you've been spiritually fed in any way through this performance tonight, then we're going to invite you to make a gift to Unity Minneapolis. And you can do it in several ways. First of all, you can go right there online if you're streaming it online with us and use that donate button and make a secured gift. You can also text us to Give to Unity 77977. That's Give, the numeral new, to Unity 77977. And you can also, by all means, write a check as well. So we would appreciate your support of Unity Minneapolis. You know, I want to make a few remarks concerning Good Friday. You know, obviously we are an open and welcoming, inclusive community. And just if you're visiting with us tonight, we especially welcome you. If you're new or you feel like you're new, we really appreciate your presence here tonight. You know, we are that open and welcoming, inclusive community. And so obviously some of the theology that was presented tonight is not necessarily accurate as far as biblical theology. Much of it is. But also the director and the writer used the power of the imagination to create what could have happened on Good Friday. And I think they did an outstanding job, and I truly appreciate all those congregants, those beautiful actors and actresses that participated in this evening. You know, as I was thinking about Good Friday, I thought about one more time the power of decision. The power of decision. And I spoke about that not too long ago, about when Jesus made that decision to return to Jerusalem. Jesus had such a passion for what he was doing, and that is getting out the word. The kingdom of God is at hand. The kingdom of God is right here and right now. And also that kingdom of God, that message of love. And Jesus was just that message of non-resistance, that message of love. He was passionate about getting this out. And of course, when he made that decision to go back to Jerusalem from that countryside, I believe with all my heart, he knew exactly about what the possibilities, the strong possibilities, might be his future, the cross. Because you see, my dear friends, Jesus was crucified because he was an insurrectionist. He totally went against the political and the religious views of that time. And I believe as he went back, he knew that possibility, but he loved it so much, and he knew that he had to get his message out, that he was willing to do what he needed to do. In fact, some theologians even believe that Jesus knew it, but he also had to do it. But I believe also that Jesus could have chose differently, but he had such a passion for what he was doing, he had to go. Now, I think many of us can relate to that. Many of us can relate about the passion that we have in our own life, the passion that we have in our own life. And in order for us to create that passion or to have that passion, there's been a transformation of some type in our life. A transformation, regardless of whether it's a recovering person, regardless of whether it's recovering from an illness or an addiction, regardless of it's coming from poverty, anything, this negativity that's happened in our life, or we seem to call it negative, that's happened in our life, motivates us, or creates a new passion in our life. And I believe that Jesus had that same awakening. That awakening to the kingdom of God is within, and he was willing to do anything to get there. And obviously, as he made that journey to the cross, from the condemnation to that cross, of course, he stations of the cross, and it was such a beautiful thing for me to be able to walk those stations and see those stations and walk on that pavement that Jesus actually, I believe, walked on. And of course, I, like some of you, I would like to change without going through that cross experience. I'd like to change my life without going through it. And I have, but in most cases, I have felt like was on the cross. I had to let go of something, cross something out in order to be resurrected. In fact, I also believe, as one of my teachers often said, if you're going to have a crucifixion, stay around for the resurrection. And Jesus, our teacher and our way shower, he knew what he was going against, this strong domination government of Rome, the strongest on the earth at that time. And he went against that in order to get his message out there. Wow. And then to go to that place is called the place of the skull, or Golgotha, and to see that and to see the strong potential of where Jesus was crucified, where he was crucified, and knowing that he went to that cross in order to get that message out, that message of love. Of course, in Unity, we often talk about those 7 last words of Jesus on the cross. And it wasn't just 7 last words. It was taken from all 4 Gospels, and it was kind of pieced together. You know, it was kind of like the birth of Jesus. The birth of Jesus was not taken just from one chapter, one book of the Gospels. It was taken from all 4. But of course, Mark, being the first one to the first Gospel, is often referred to as the most accurate Gospel. And yet, it's putting together Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to get these 7 last words of Jesus. And we've done them here often on a Good Friday service. But I believe these 7 last words of Jesus also has a place for us, not only a place in history, but also a place for us to take them in and to live them in our own life. So, Jesus' 7 last words was, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You see, my dear friends, even when Jesus was on the cross, Jesus was such a teacher, a master teacher, and he was such a believer in what he was doing that I believe these 7 last words of Jesus, he was still talking to us, me and you, still teaching us, even from the time that he was suffering on that cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Emphasizing again that power of forgiveness within us. And sometimes we think that we cannot do our forgiveness work. And yes, we know without a doubt that it is not I, but the Christ within who does the work. Often what I need to do is surrender it to that Christ within to do that work. Do my part, but also surrender it to that Christ within. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And today you will be in paradise. We know that Jesus was crucified between 2 robbers or 2 thieves. And we must remember also that crucifixion was the most agonizing death penalty offered by the Roman government. There were other ways that they took out people, but crucifixion was the worst. And of course, many people believe that the 2 crosses of Jesus, or the 2 thieves on each side, there was one for the past and one for the future. And that the one for the future said, today, Jesus said to him, today you will be in paradise. Again, that teaching moment of, guess what? The kingdom of God is right here and right now. Today we can be in paradise. And he's telling that to us in our own life. This kingdom of God is not somewhere further down the road. It is right here and right now. It is within. And he taught that from the cross. And then, of course, woman, behold your son. Behold your mother. He was speaking to the beloved John and his mother that was standing there. Oh, my goodness. Jesus was, yes, fully divine and also human. And I believe without a doubt that he was taking care of his loved ones, to be sure that his mother was taken care of. But it has a larger universal meaning for us as well. It means that we too are to take care of those that love us, that need us, and we take care of that with absolute love. And also it goes over beyond just that personal mother. We can look at each and every person and know that the Christ presence is right there within them as well. That we are all related. We are all related because we're all one and we're all part of this human race. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? In his humanity, often I believe that Jesus could have felt forsaken. But yet, without a doubt, he still knew that it was his to do. Just as the prodigal son went into the far place and had terrible experiences, he might have also felt forsaken. But he knew that he was also made that decision to go home. And Jesus, I believe, felt that at this expression of his work was complete. It was indeed complete in this physical form, complete. And I thirst. I thirst. I believe that as this was about demonstration, about the power of Jesus being thirsty, and then also, my dear friends, wanting something, and he manifested that, something to wet his lips with. And sure enough, a Roman centurion held a sponge soaked in vinegar, to quench his thirst. So yes, again, Jesus was teaching us as those things sometimes that we ask for, that we also receive in our life. So again, it's about thirsting. Those desires that we want in our life are put in our heart for a reason, for manifestation in our own life. And it is finished. How many times have we said in our own life, I am finished with this. I am putting it on the cross. I am crossing it out. I am finished with this old belief over here. And I believe that that's exactly what Jesus was doing. He was saying, it is finished. And he's challenged us to let go of those old beliefs and those ideas and be finished with them. It's finished. Cross it out. Put a dot. Even when it might come up again, whatever we're trying to overcome in our life, we can just know as that may be the second crop. But guess what? We pull it out knowing that it is finished. What we have done is finished. And Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. This is the ultimate. This is the ultimate part of overcoming those things in my life, saying, I have done all that I can do. You have called me to do this work. I am now surrendered, and into your hands I commend my spirit. I let go, and I let God. It's about letting go and letting God. Was Jesus' work finished? Had he totally surrendered and let go? I believe also, with all doubt, that he proved to us that resurrection, which we will celebrate. We'll celebrate on Easter Sunday as well. And he still, I believe, had work to do. He still had a little work to do in this expression before he ascended into heaven. Wow, that was a quick rundown on the 7 last words of Jesus. But it's just been so important to me to at least verbalize those words each and every Easter. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of our Unity movement, reminds us again that sometimes when we look at the crucifixions in our life, if we will look at it a different way, look at it in a way that is through this crucifixion that we are able to let go and let God. We're able to bring ourselves to a different level of consciousness through crossing it out and crucifying it. So, my dear friends, Good Friday doesn't sound good from the play we just saw. But yet, if we can look at everything we have drawn into our life, we have drawn into our life for a reason. And I believe that Jesus, too, was part of the process of this Good Friday by drawing this to his life. He knew exactly, I believe, what he was getting himself into, so to speak. He knew that he had to be crucified. There's many people out there that would not take that philosophy at all, and that is absolutely okay. My friends, I love you. I bless you on this Good Friday, and I behold that living presence of God within you, and so it is.